How's this? Okay. Thank you so much for having me. I'm just so grateful that I was asked to do this. So yes, I'm a Hatha yoga instructor, and I just want to talk a little bit about my journey getting there. And I figured out a little too late that I don't know everything. And it was kind of a shock that, you know, when you're in your 20s and life is just crazy and fast and fun, and you think that you have all the answers. And sometimes when you realize you don't, it's sort of hard. So, with that being said, I'm just going to lead you into how this journey began. My husband and I went on a vacation last week to Florida. It was amazing. I highly recommend it. And as we were in Orlando on our last day, we really wanted to go to the beach, but traffic was terrible. And so we decided we had to get to the airport instead. And I was trying to be optimistic about it, you know, accepting it, not being attached to the idea of what I thought the day should be. My husband had no problem with being optimistic after we got through security because he found a bar stool and a glass of beer. And he finds humor in the fact that when you go to the airport, people suddenly turn into like superhumans. You see people that are like running and they haven't run in 30 years. And you know, we've all read about people when they have an adrenaline rush, they can pick up cars and throw them. Try watching a mother with 3 kids who's late for her flight. And we watched one mother swoop up 3 kids and their luggage while running 100 miles an hour. That's superhuman strength. And so that was an optimistic, that's why my husband was so optimistic. But anyhow, while we were in Florida, we were talking about what it was like before we had our son, and reminiscing about old trips we'd gone on. And one of our favorite trips was New York City. And my husband's very dear friend, they've been friends since they were about 6 or 7, was with us on that trip. And Jordan said at the end of the conversation, I miss Tyler, and I really need to make an effort to reach out to him. And we haven't seen Tyler in about 4 years, even though he just lives in Kalispell, because you know how life happens. Anyhow, so back to the airport. Jordan finishes his beer, and he's in good humor, goes to the bathroom, and as he's walking back to meet me, someone taps him on the shoulder, and he turns around, and there's Tyler. So here we are. I had to write this number down. It's like insane. 2,646 miles away from home. And boom, there's Tyler. When in the last 4 years, they haven't been able to drive the 173 miles to coordinate, to meet with each other. And, you know, they started reminiscing and talking, and then it gets stranger. We find out that Tyler's on our flight. And then we find out that Tyler was on our flight there. Just so weird how life happens. And such a perfect example of how when you just let go and you accept the moment, how it can be so beautiful. This is the beauty in letting go, making a conscious decision to release with full acceptance whatever the present moment may bring, because you never know what it may bring. I have this quote by John Zinn. But it's not only the stickiness of our desires concerning outer events which catches us, nor is it holding on with our hands. We hold on with our minds. We catch ourselves holding, often desperately, to narrow views, to self-serving hopes and wishes. Letting go really refers to choosing to become transparent to the strong pull of our own likes and dislikes, and of the unawareness that draws us to cling to them, to be transparent requires that we allow fears and insecurities to play themselves out in the field of full awareness. I remember in college I heard the term soul searching. Immediately it was an excuse for everything. I quit my job, I'm soul searching. I dropped out of college, I'm soul searching. I did drugs, sorry Mom. I'm soul searching. You know, everything became about soul searching. I moved to Hawaii with a backpack and a guitar. I'm soul searching. And then it started to become evident that I was talking the talk and not walking the walk. There was this emptiness, even though I was surrounding myself by what I envisioned soul searching to be, an acceptance in the life of spirituality, you know, living on the beach and playing drums and everything that I thought would make it so that I was soul searching and totally, again, I thought I knew everything. And then in my mid to late 20s, this soul searching led me to yoga. I became engrossed in it, realizing that there was this beautiful reciprocation in the process. In yoga, I could see physical evidence through the growth, I could see physical evidence that growth occurred with whatever energy that I put into it. And eventually it began to take shape beyond the physical aspect. I began to surrender myself to the moment, and suddenly things became easier. Wayne Dyer once said, "Change the way you see things, and the things you see will change." It's true, life is as you see it, and sometimes it's really hard. But finding moments of gratitude when it's hard to accept, those are comforting. Even if it's like, I'm so glad my shoes matched today. You know, because when you're pregnant, that's actually a good thing to be grateful for. But anyhow, in 2013, I was T-boned by an uninsured driver while driving on East Side Highway. And my vehicle was totaled, and I spent almost a week in the hospital, and I was furious. I spent months being angry. I took the driver to court, wanting justice, restitution, not realizing that it wasn't about the money. That I was being forced for the first time in my life I was being humbled. People had to help me get dressed. My husband had to help me get dressed. If I sneezed, it hurt. And I started to become aware of the bigger picture. And I left the pastry world for a brief couple of years and decided to work at the youth home, knowing that selfishly in some ways that it would be fulfilling for me, but also knowing that I would be helping others. I started to accept this process, and while working at the youth home, I caught wind of the story that the boy that hit me, it was his 18th birthday, and started hearing about his life through others, and I found forgiveness, and I started accepting this journey that I was on as this beautiful path versus being angry and wanting him to pay for my car and my medical bills, and I wanted those 6 months back where I couldn't do my yoga or run without hurting. And the minute I started forgiving and letting go, everything started changing. And I remember writing a letter to the judge, and this is 2 years later. I probably had gotten about $27 at that point, and saying, I don't want restitution for my car. I don't know exactly how I worded it, but I just said I'm really feeling like I can let this go. Wrote to the kid on Facebook. I found him on Facebook, and we discussed some things. And fast forward another year and a half, and I find out I'm pregnant, and I no longer wanted to work knowing that I was going to be a mom. I wanted that first year with my child. I didn't know how I was going to make ends meet, not working. My husband works, but finances, babies are expensive. And the last day of work before my maternity leave, I walked my dog to the mailbox, and there's this check in the mail from this boy. $4,000. Out of nowhere. And I was so speechless, like astounded. And he wrote to me and said that I changed his life. When he showed me, I can't even tell you. I mean, just this beautiful moment of reciprocation and an example of when you let go. There's this bigger plan. And all of a sudden, like, I felt comfortable about being home for, the next year. $4,000 can go a long ways. And I know that was a lot for him in his life. So, moving on down the road, I had my son, and eventually got back into yoga, needed it. Being a first-time mom, there was a lot of things that I was really shocked by. Yeah, it's hard. And mostly that I realized that my individuality, I was no longer, I felt like I was no longer myself. I was just a mom. People weren't saying, "How are you?" They were saying, "How's your baby?" And I started to feel really lonely. And I didn't recognize that until I went to my first yoga class postpartum. I was about 7 or 8 months after having Camden. And after the class, I'm driving home and I just start crying. This beautiful release. And I attribute it, to that moment in yoga class at the very end. They call it Shavasana, where it's kind of the echo of your practice. And you just sit and you find stillness. If your nose itches, don't itch it. Just be still. And it was the first moment of stillness I'd had since before I went into labor. And I also attribute it to just the unification of mind, body, and spirit that yoga brings through breath, the recognition of self. When you walk into a yoga studio, any role that you play, whether it's mother, daughter, sister, brother, that role is left outside the door. You walk in and you're a yogi. And the beautiful thing about yoga is you can live yoga off the mat. It's not just about stretching and breathing, it's about accepting. Buddha says, the root of suffering is attachment. Isn't life all about being attached? Being sewn into this web of desires and materials, various personalities, and a plethora of experiences? Or perhaps it is about the very basic needs: food, clothing, shelter, survival. Is there a place where simplicity and attachment can dwell, swinging delicately in unison from this web which we've sewn? One of my greatest challenges is accepting where I am in the very present moment. Still a work in progress. I've always been a dreamer, spending those elementary years staring out the window, imagining where I could be and what I would be doing when the weather improved. My grades suffered as early as 5th grade. Because the dreaming turned into a yearning to be someone other than who I was. Longing for a sense of purpose and desperate for recognition, I spent countless hours trying to meet those needs to no avail. I knew when I applied for yoga training that my father was dying. I knew, there would be a time in training that I would be forced to say goodbye. I know a lot of you were by my side for this and I appreciate it. Anyhow, moving on. I was scared that I wouldn't have the strength to finish. I was scared I would self-sabotage. And as the first module grew closer, I watched my dad grow thinner. With each passing day, my anxiety increased, knowing that his death was imminent. And though this loomed over my head, I suddenly realized I was exactly where I was meant to be. 3 days before the module, my dad told me he was done fighting. and his eyes, that once danced and sparkled, were flat and almost hollow. He was exasperated, depleted, and defeated. I didn't want to leave him to go to the module, but he needed me to go, and I needed me to go. This was part of accepting the present moment, accepting that we could not change what was happening, but we could make the best of it, regardless. And I don't regret my decision. One of the biggest rewards thus far is realizing that I am safe and knowing that yoga is more than doing a handstand, which I'm still working on, or being flexible. Yoga is reflection. Yoga is love. Yoga is acceptance. Yoga is growth. Yoga is the unification of all of those past experiences with the present moment as well as the future. It is being one. It is being still. It is acknowledging and trusting that there is a reason for everything. And perhaps this is the balance of the web we create. Everything is in fact connected, webbed together precisely as it should be. And that survival is instinctual, but acceptance is our choice. This acceptance is what allows us to detach from ego. And without that attachment, suffering is not present. The tools of meditation, breathing, and knowing what particular poses most benefit specific ailments, whether physical or mental, have been profoundly useful. My relationship with yoga is no longer a physical one, it is spiritual. It feeds my soul, and it allows me to process stress, anxiety, and loss with gratitude. It has affected me in countless ways, opening doors to opportunity and giving me a voice when I needed it most. It has taught me strength and patience, and as I grow, it grows with me. My dad died several days after Module 1. His last words to me were, "Stay with me." I held his hand for half an hour after he was gone. I couldn't bear to let go. I was scared. I was terrified of what the future held without him there. But when I let go, I realized that something within me didn't die like he did. Something within me was born. I stepped out alive, yet vulnerable. And accepting this vulnerability allowed me to accept love from others, such as a lot of you who were there for me, thank you, at a time when I needed it most. That being said, in my yoga classes, at the very end of my session, I ask people to close their eyes if they're comfortable doing so. And I read a poem or something positive. And so today, if you're comfortable doing so, I'd like you to close your eyes. I'm going to read you a poem that I really feel, it's just beautiful. I think you'll all appreciate it. This is by Mary Oliver. It's called When I Am Among the Trees. When I am among the trees, especially the willows and the honey locust, equally the beech, the oaks and the pines, they give off such hints of gladness. I would almost say that they save me, and daily. I am so distant from the hope of myself, in which I have goodness and discernment, and never hurry through the world, but walk slowly and bow often. Around me the trees stir in their leaves and call out, "Stay a while." The light flows from their branches, and they call again. It's simple, they say, and you too have come into the world to do this, to go easy, and to be filled with light and to shine. Thank you for your time today. Namaste.
Namaste. people.